Late one summer afternoon, a small plane disappeared from radar over a sleepy Midwestern town. Rumors began swirling immediately. Was 22-year-old singer Cole Swensen on board? For those who watched him light up the America's Got Talent stage just weeks earlier, the heartbreaking tragedy felt unthinkable. Fans flooded social media searching for answers as the skies stayed eerily silent. The truth behind what happened that day is still unclear. Was it an accident? A twist of fate? What we do know is that Cole's rise, and the tragic questions left in its wake, will haunt everyone who heard his voice. Before we go deeper into the mystery of that heartbreaking day, let's go back to where Cole's story truly began. When news first broke about Cole Swensen, the rising star who had stunned audiences on America's Got Talent, fans couldn't believe what they were hearing. It wasn't just because Cole had captured hearts with his powerful voice and humble story. It was because the circumstances surrounding what happened next were filled with confusion, whispers, and unanswered questions. A small plane had reportedly gone down late one night, in a rural area far from city lights, leaving locals and authorities scrambling to piece together what had happened. But no official report ever clearly confirmed if Cole was even on that plane. All people had were scattered rumors, a chilling silence on his usually active social media accounts, and a deepening sense of worry. What made it even harder was that just a few days earlier, Cole had been on top of the world, smiling in interviews, sharing his hopes for the future, and giving performances that left the AGT judges speechless. Now, all anyone had were shaky headlines and theories. Was the small plane accident connected to him? Why was nobody telling the full story? And most of all, was Cole okay? As speculation spiraled, fans searched for any scrap of information that might explain what was going on. Some said he was on his way to a secret gig. Others thought maybe he'd needed a quiet getaway from all the pressure. But the deeper people dug, the less they found, as if someone had erased him overnight. And as you'll see in this video, what happened after that night wasn't just a tragedy. It became a heartbreaking chapter that forever changed the way people saw Cole. But before we jump too far ahead, let's go back to where this story really began. Because to understand what happened, we need to revisit his early days, his struggles, and his climb to fame, a climb that was never as easy as it looked. What shaped Cole before AGT? Why did someone with his talent and bright future disappear into so much mystery? Let's look at his childhood in the next part, a part that will reveal heartbreaking challenges you never knew he faced. Cole Swensen wasn't born into a world of bright lights and big stages. Growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, he often felt trapped by the expectations of those around him. Even as a kid, Cole was different, more sensitive, more thoughtful, and always humming some melody under his breath. Music wasn't just a hobby, it was his escape. But his childhood was far from easy. Family troubles and financial struggles followed him like a dark cloud, forcing him to grow up too fast. Nights spent wondering if there'd be food on the table were common. And yet somehow, Cole never let go of his dream. He would practice in his tiny bedroom, recording himself on an old cracked phone, posting videos that hardly anyone watched. Every day was a fight. Between believing in himself and fearing he wasn't enough, it left deep scars. Scars that even fame couldn't erase. When AGT eventually found him, Cole wasn't sure if he could do it. Could someone like him really make it? Was his talent strong enough? In those early auditions, you could see that struggle in his eyes, every note trembling on the edge of self-doubt. But what happened next would change his life forever. What nobody knew, though, was that every time he stepped into the spotlight, he was carrying a burden nobody else could see. That burden followed him all the way to that tragic night. And in the next part, we'll dive into the shocking moment that almost made him give up before he even began. What was the heartbreaking event that nearly shattered his dreams before AGT even started? Because we will reveal the devastating secret that shaped everything. Before Cole's name ever appeared in bright letters on a marquee, there was one devastating event that could have ended his story forever. Just 1 year before his audition, Cole lost someone who was his entire world, a family member who had always believed in him. The one person who heard him sing when nobody else would, passed away suddenly. Overnight, his safe place disappeared. He stopped posting his little clips, stopped going to the local talent shows, and disappeared into a fog of grief that threatened to erase his passion forever. Friends say they barely recognized him. He rarely left his room. Music, which had been his solace, felt too painful now. Every melody reminded him of what he'd lost. For months, Cole thought about walking away for good. Who was left to cheer him on? Who was left to believe? The pressure of making something of himself felt crushing. But in that dark time, something shifted. A handwritten note, tucked away in an old guitar case, reminded him of a promise he had made long ago, a promise to live his dream, no matter what. That note, with its shaky handwriting and simple encouragement, gave him a reason to sing again. Cole picked up his guitar, wiped away the dust, and began to hum. Step by step, note by note, he pulled himself back. And that fight to survive would become the fuel that powered him onto the AGT stage. But as you'll see in the next part, the weight of that pain never truly left him. Even as the crowd roared and judges rose to their feet, there was something deeper stirring in Cole. Something that would surface just as quickly as it disappeared that mysterious night. What truly happened backstage at AGT? Were there signs Cole was still battling those demons? America's Got Talent was supposed to be the happiest chapter of Cole's life. Every performance was more powerful than the last, and millions watched as he sang his way into their hearts. But behind the cameras, the story was very different. Production assistants whispered that Cole often kept to himself, eyes down, humming quietly like a ritual to calm his nerves. Makeup artists noticed him jump at loud noises, as if the pressure and attention were too much. Even his closest friends weren't sure what was going on. On stage, he was magnetic. Off stage, he was fragile. Rumors spread that the pressure was breaking him, that he hadn't healed from the personal losses that had shaped him. In interviews, he smiled and spoke about chasing his dreams. But if you looked closely, you could see the sadness lurking just beneath the surface. It wasn't that he wasn't grateful. It was just that fame shone a light on every corner of his pain, leaving him feeling exposed in a way he'd never felt before. And all this was building toward a breaking point. That breaking point would come in the most unexpected of places, one that nobody, not even Cole, saw coming. Audiences loved him, the judges championed him, but there was one night that changed everything forever. That one night on AGT would leave him forever marked. And as you'll discover in Part 5, it all began with a strange twist of fate that nobody could have scripted. What happened on that fateful AGT night that shifted his future forever? It was supposed to be just another routine live show, the kind where the crowd claps politely, the judges offer their feedback, and the next performer takes the stage. But when Cole walked out that night, something felt different. A strange tension filled the theater, as if the air itself was charged with electricity. People in the crowd whispered, sensing that something wasn't quite right. From the very first note, Cole seemed distant, his hands trembling slightly on the mic. What most viewers missed, but those close to him caught, was the brief moment his eyes unfocused, like he wasn't really there. Then came the pause, right in the middle of his song. It lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like forever. Gasps rippled through the audience. The judges exchanged worried looks. Nobody had ever seen Cole stumble like this before. For a heartbreaking moment, it was as if all the pressure, all the pain he had carried, was finally crashing down around him. He managed to finish the song, earning polite applause, but backstage, friends say he disappeared, vanished into the night. And from that moment, the mystery began to grow. What happened after that show? Why didn't anyone hear from him for days? And most chilling of all, what was going through his mind as he left that stage? Because what happened next would become the stuff of legend and heartbreaking rumors. And as you'll see in Part 6, the story was only beginning. What happened after that heartbreaking performance? Where did Cole go? The hours after Cole left the AGT stage have become one of the most talked about mysteries among fans and insiders. Some say he was seen slipping out a back door, head down, avoiding everyone. Others whisper that someone was waiting for him outside, someone who understood his pain better than the crowd ever could. What we do know is that Cole didn't go back to his hotel that night. Security cameras caught him once, crossing the parking lot alone, then nothing. Calls to his phone went straight to voicemail. Texts from concerned friends went unanswered. Even his manager had no clue where he was. It was as if he'd disappeared into thin air. Fans began to worry, and with good reason. Because just a few hours later, reports started surfacing about a small plane flying out of a nearby private airfield. Nobody was sure who was on it. Nobody could say where it was going. But as the story began to spread, a deeper fear took hold. Was Cole one of its passengers? Rumors multiplied like wildfire. Could he have just needed to escape, or was something darker at play? That was the question nobody could answer. But what we do know is that those hours were the last time anyone could say they truly saw him, before the world changed forever. And as you'll see in Part 7, those first chilling reports were only the beginning. What exactly happened on that mysterious flight? By the next morning, the internet was buzzing with unconfirmed reports of a crash near a remote stretch of forest. Details were blurry. Some said it was a small private plane. Others weren't sure. Emergency teams were sent to the scene, and questions began to swirl faster than answers could come. Was Cole on board? Why had nobody heard from him? Friends and family clung to hope, refusing to believe the worst. But hours passed with no updates, only silence. Media outlets picked up the story, and soon hashtags began to trend. Fans around the world left messages of support under his last video post, hoping someone would say it wasn't true. But then, a single shaky photo leaked. A burnt fragment of a plane wing bearing markings that matched a plane recently chartered out of the area. And at that moment, everyone held their breath. The mystery was deepening. Why was Cole on that plane? What was he running from? Police reports would take time to surface, but one thing was clear. This was becoming a heartbreaking tragedy. And as you'll discover in Part 8, the hours and days that followed would reveal just how tangled this story truly was. What did investigators discover? And who was waiting for him before the crash? Part 8 uncovers the shocking hidden details. As investigators began carefully combing through the crash site, they uncovered fragments that only deepened the mystery surrounding Cole's final moments. Personal items were scattered across the charred landscape, including a worn guitar pick engraved with Cole's initials and a small, leather-bound notebook filled with lyrics no one had ever seen before. The pages were smudged with rain and soot, but every word was unmistakably his, capturing emotions so raw they felt like a diary of his most secret thoughts. Some verses spoke of regret, others spoke of a desperate desire to leave the past behind forever. But the most puzzling and heartbreaking discovery was a crumpled note, hastily stuffed into a pocket of his jacket. The handwriting was rushed and jagged as though he'd written it in a hurry. The words were difficult to read, blurred by water and debris, yet they hinted at someone expecting him at the other end of the flight. Who was this mysterious person? And what was their connection to him? It was impossible not to wonder if they had been a long-lost friend, a past lover, or someone even closer, someone who held a key to Cole's true story. As the investigators examined this strange clue, rumors began to surge once more. Was Cole chasing one last chance to make things right with someone? Could he have been hoping to leave the pain behind once and for all? Some speculated that he wasn't simply traveling for a performance. Perhaps he was going to say goodbye to someone or to meet them and start a new chapter far away from the spotlight that had both built him up and worn him down. Police weren't sharing details with the public, and Cole's family had gone completely silent, refusing to answer even the most basic questions. Every clue they left behind only raised more questions that tugged at the heartstrings of everyone who had followed Cole's journey. Many wondered if they'd ever truly known him at all, or if they had only seen the surface of someone far more complex and fragile than they could have imagined. And that was the most heartbreaking part of it all, the sense that there had always been a deeper story beneath his songs and his bright smile. A story nobody had quite pieced together before it was too late. The full picture was like a puzzle nobody could quite fit together, leaving those who loved him feeling as though they had missed something critical. Every clue painted a different part of the portrait, yet none of them were enough to give a true answer. And as you'll see in Part 9, the deeper this story goes, the more it reveals the heartbreaking truths Cole kept hidden from the world, what he was running from, and who was waiting for him at the end of that ill-fated journey. Will haunt his story forever. What were those lyrics, and who was on the other side of that flight? Part 9 reveals the final pieces of the puzzle. When the contents of Cole's notebook finally leaked, they told a story nobody had been ready for. Raw, painful, and incredibly personal lyrics about loneliness, pressure, and feeling trapped. Lines that hinted at someone struggling to hold on to hope. Every page was filled with vivid, heartbreaking images of sleepless nights spent wondering if all of this was really worth it. Fans recognized his handwriting immediately, and they wept as they read. These weren't just songs or drafts of future albums. They were an unfiltered cry for help, stitched together by someone so talented that even his sadness became poetry. With every verse, the weight of his words became clearer. Cole had been battling feelings most people never see. Lyrics about isolation despite being surrounded by crowds. About wanting to disappear, not forever, but long enough to remember who he really was. Even those who thought they knew him realized they hadn't understood the depth of his struggle. Every scribble in the margins felt like a personal confession, one that nobody had seen, or maybe nobody had been able to fully grasp until this tragic moment. And when investigators followed the trail of the mysterious person who was supposed to meet him that night, they uncovered an even deeper tragedy. It wasn't someone with fame, wealth, or power. It was someone who had been offering him an escape, someone who truly understood his pain because they had fought the same demons. They had seen him slipping further and further away, and they had reached out their hand hoping to catch him before it was too late. That person's name was never officially released, but those who knew Cole closely whispered that they had been one of his only true friends during his dizzying rise to fame. They weren't a publicist or a fellow star. They were someone who knew him as a person, not a persona. That friendship was the one thread that may have convinced him to take that flight in the first place, hoping for a chance to breathe, to reset, to believe again. But fate had other plans. In the aftermath, his absence was felt like a deep, aching hollow in the hearts of all who admired him. Some wondered what might have happened if he had stayed just a little longer. Others wished they could have told him that there was always a way back into the light. And as you'll see in part 10, the way this story ends will forever change the way you remember Cole Swensen. It will force you to see the pressures he faced, the help he tried to find, and the heartbreaking reality that even someone who appeared to have everything could feel so alone. Who was this secret friend? What would Cole's life have looked like if the plane had never taken off? And most importantly, what lessons can we take from his heartbreaking story? The final part reveals the full emotional conclusion. In the end, Cole Swensen wasn't just a talented singer. He was a young soul who fought battles most people never saw. The heartbreaking tragedy of that small plane became a powerful symbol of a much deeper struggle, one that so many people face, especially those who live under the spotlight or carry burdens they feel they cannot share. Cole wasn't only someone who could move crowds with his voice, he was also someone who felt everything so deeply, who embraced the highs and the lows, even when they threatened to pull him under. In the days after the news was confirmed, tributes poured in from fellow artists, lifelong friends, and countless fans who had been touched by his voice, his lyrics, and his honesty. Candlelight vigils were held across the country, spontaneous gatherings filled with tears, music, and heartfelt stories. People who had never met him felt compelled to come together in parks, on street corners, and outside his favorite venues, each of them united by a sense of loss and admiration for a soul that shined too briefly. Online, hashtags dedicated to his memory trended for days. People shared heartfelt messages, tribute videos, and their favorite performances, creating a digital memorial that showed just how much impact one life can have on so many. More than anything, though, people began to speak up, not just about his talent, but about his humanity. Friends recalled his generosity and sense of humor. Industry professionals reflected on his intense drive to create meaningful art. Fans told stories of how his music had lifted them up during their own dark times. And most importantly, there was an outpouring of support for mental health awareness. Artists, influencers, and everyday people encouraged one another to speak up before it's too late, to check in on those they care about, to listen without judgment. They reminded each other that reaching out is a sign of strength, not weakness. And while the questions surrounding the crash will always linger, why it happened, whether anything could have been different, one thing is forever clear: Cole's impact will never fade.